I can once again thank the users over on Reddit for feeding me content to talk about, and I think we all know I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the Chivalry subreddit. It can be a great place to go for news, memes, and clips, but it can also be an echo chamber for the salty and unskilled to complain about virtual nonsense to justify why they get stomped out game after game. And yesterday, I went on the subreddit expecting to see people hyped up about true crossplay finally having a release date, and in true Reddit fashion, I actually walked into the opposite, a just salt-filled cry fest of controller players wanting crossplay to be disabled. I'm Strider the Champ, and in today's video, I will be discussing controller versus mouse and keyboard in Chivalry 2, and if console players are at a disadvantage. This whole mouse versus controller conversation reminds me very much of the Messer situation, and I made a video over the summer when people were just in hysteria over the power of the Messer in public lobbies, and if you read through the threads on Reddit, you would get the impression that every player in the game was running a Messer, and if you come across one of these players, you might as well just hit F10 because you're dead. And the reality in game is just vastly different. For one, players definitely gravitate towards a variety of different weapons, and secondly, I would kill the high majority of players I came up against regardless of my or their weapon choice. I actually still do not think there's been one death I've had in this game that cannot be tracked down to me either making a mistake, a bad decision, or just straight up being outplayed. And yet a very vocal crowd screamed to the heavens that they were getting stomped out because enemies chose to use the massively overpowered Messer. This was totally fake news and what I like to call a get good situation. Call that little introduction foreshadowing because some hard truths are about to be told regarding this game on controller or mouse. Let's first start off by saying mouse and keyboard is a superior input, period. This is why games implement aim assist for controller players, which Chivalry 2 does have some mild aim assist. But Chivalry is not an aim-intensive game. What really makes a player excel in Chivalry is their knowledge and mastery of the game's systems, mechanics, and timings. This means that when players cross swords in Chivalry, the victor very rarely comes down to which input a player is using, but whose skills and knowledge was higher. In fact, I'd be highly confident that if I sat down the gamers who want crossplay turned off in my high-end PC, their scores would be virtually no different than when they play with controller. And I'm not saying that there are not some valid arguments on how controller play could be improved. I understand that it can be hard to throw weapons and jab, and I agree that controller players should be able to change their key bindings. It's a basic function that most games should have. But expecting key binding changes to suddenly change a player's score from a bottom of the board feeder to a top of the board pub stomper is living in an altered reality. Throwing weapons is a small component of the combat mechanics, and I know myself personally, I prefer to keep my weapons in my hands and only get a few kills around by throwing. The real skill of a player is determined by their mastery of the bread and butter core combat mechanics, things like footwork, countering, feinting, and counter-feinting. And all of these mechanics can be performed at a high level by controller players. It boggled my mind that one Reddit thread cited things like ballerinas and spinning for a reason why controllers and mouse players should not be in the same lobby, since first off, you can spin on a controller. Secondly, only an extremely small percentage of the community uses these techniques. And lastly, a ballerina is easily countered via gamble, and will not be able to consistently pull off these techniques against good players. In a 64-player lobby especially, there generally will only be a few strong players, meaning that a lack of performance generally does not come from one's choice of gaming input, but from a lack of skill. Lobbies are also mixed, meaning controller players are also fighting plenty of other controller players. Now throw in the fact that there are many controller players who are top tier Chivalry players. I regularly play with Sir Chivalrous and Typer, who are just complete savages on controller, nullifying any arguments that players on console cannot compete. And I think we can thank AAA games with their safe space, skill based matchmaking systems for conversations like these popping up. Gamers have been conditioned to being hand fed success by developers who want to sell them microtransactions. And when they are faced with a reality that they are really pretty mediocre at a game, they run to social media to cry. Gaming input will only really matter at the highest end of gaming, where skill level and knowledge are very close. So, unless you're competing in the paid duel tournaments with other top 1% Chivalry 2 players, a lack of success will come down to a lack of skill. That's it for me. Subscribe to the channel, follow on Twitch, and I will see you in the next video. Champ out.